Welcome to the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Anita Brooks, and here you'll find teaching topics, interviews, conversations, and coaching tips, all designed to help you level up. We all lead someone. The question is, are we leading well, exceptionally well? So join me on a quest, not for perfection, but absolutely for exceptional leadership. Well, it's hard to believe this is the last week of our focus on strengthening profitability, but I have been saving this episode for you. I'm really excited to share this. I'm going to tell the story of two different leaders and two different approaches that will paint a picture to show you the power of focus and the impact on profitability for your business, your nonprofit, whatever kind of organizational status you have. So I'm going to share something real life from some of my real coaching. As always, I usually disguise my clients unless they specifically ask me to share about them. But I think the learning lessons can help many people, and I hope it helps you if you're in leadership and you have any responsibility, which most do, in touching the net profits of the organization that you serve or the company that you own. So let's dig right in. So as I talk about these two leaders, I'm going to share with you a coaching exercise / coaching challenge that I take a lot of my clients through. Now, this is a very simple activity. However, like so many things that have powerful impact, simple does not necessarily translate to easy. Okay. So I've had more than one client that I've given this exercise to. I've held them accountable for following through, but yet they just didn't meet the challenge. And the outcomes speak for themselves. But for the clients who do take on the challenge and they do engage with the accountability measures that I put in place as a coach, the outcomes for them is vastly different. And so as I tell these stories, I am going to share with you some figures. And just so you know, I do have permission to share the figures. I'm just going to do that. They'll be hard numbers, but they're going to be shared in an abstract way, again, because it just would not be appropriate for me to share details about the businesses themselves. So let's just dig into these stories. So the first one I want to talk about, I'm going to use a name of Jeff. Jeff is a leader in a thriving company, and they gross approximately $1.5 million annually. Okay. So that's gross revenues, not net. So by definition, they are considered a smaller company. Now, as I share this, some of you may be listening and you may be thinking, look, that's a big company to me. I don't bring in nearly that kind of money. I don't care if you bring in $100,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $10,000 a year. I promise what I'm going to share with you today can exponentially help you increase not only the gross revenues that you bring in, but also the net profits can be primed and increased for your business or your company or your organization as well. But in this case, I was working with Jeff as part of my P4 Power Coaching scope with them. And so I gave him this challenge, and that it was to pinpoint his top 3 most profitable work activities. So when I first give this to clients and to leaders in particular, they often are challenged. And so I will work with them. And a lot of times I'll go through a series of questions to help them drill down and identify what those top 3 most profitable work activities are. So this is what I mean by most profitable. I mean, these are tasks or responsibilities or any kind of actions that they follow in their daily work operations that are going to help drive profits for the company. And particularly, as always, I focus especially on net profitability. Okay. Because sometimes we can be profitable, but not net profitable. And so I really help bring that to light by some of these questions that I have. And there's just not enough time for me to go through a series of questions. And some of them I custom tailor depending on the client and what they do, what their needs are, what their particular focus is, what I've been hired to do. But these questions can help a leader much more quickly identify what those three areas are. But after that detailed analysis, so Jeff and I, in this case, we discovered what his most impactful activities or tasks were for the company that he served. And the ones that were most profitable for him were strategic planning, customer relationship building, and team development. And again, we went through a series of unlayering and really digging deep to, there were some measurements that I needed to get from him, and we pulled all that together and we decided that these were the most profitable. This was the highest and best use of his time when he was at work in his workday. So with my guidance, Jeff agreed to take on this coaching challenge. And this is my challenge when I work with clients. I want them to spend 80% of their time on these crucial activities. Because see, here's what happens to most people. We go to work and we have a to-do list, and we may or may not get to check anything or everything off of that list. But what we don't do is we don't really evaluate whether or not the tasks on that list make sense from a profitability perspective. So that's something that I help my clients work with. So in Jeff's case, he was more intentional and more focused on strategic planning, customer relationship building, and team development. So he was following the 80-20 rule. And this is something that I encourage. So you spend 80% of your time on these top three most profitable tasks, and then the other 20% can be given to the other things that are not necessarily going to have as much impact on the bottom line. Well, here's what happened. In Jeff's case, his strategic decisions, we were able to go through 3 or 4 different ways of measuring, and we determined that it boosted revenues by 10%. Just by being more intentional on strategic decision making instead of allowing himself to more often get disrupted and distracted by less profitable things. The strong customer relationships piece for him, it increased repeat business we measured by 15%. And team development reduced turnovers we estimated by 5%. Now, again, these were informed estimates. So we weren't just like picking figures out of thin air. We were looking at financials. We were digging into the financials and looking at some of the specific general ledger items. But look at that. I mean, right now you're talking about 30% overall between these three areas impacting the net profitability of the business. But I want to take that a step further because I'll tell you, there's nothing like painting a picture. So if you translate those percentages that I shared with you into dollars, this is what it meant for this $1.5 million gross revenue business. It was another $150,000. So a 15% increase in repeat business, assuming that, it accounted for half of their sales, added another $112,500. Reducing turnover contributed an estimated $75,000 in savings. And then, being able to focus in all of those areas, what we ended up coming up with in totality, including the customer service side, was $337,500 that was added to the company's bottom line in 1 year. Now, that was not all net profit. So, we had to take out Jeff's labor for some of that. There were obviously a lot of other expenses. Some were additional labor for some of his team members and so forth. But still yet, when we took the expenditures out of that additional gross that we were able to measure and say that he was able to add to the bottom line in a year's time, it still was right around $250,000. I don't know very many companies that would not like to add an additional $250,000 to their net profits at the end of a year, but especially one that's already only grossing $1.5 million a year. That's pretty substantial. But see, it didn't stop there, because as I was working with Jeff, and especially like we evaluated at 30 days, then we evaluated at 60 days, then we assessed at 90 days, 6 months, and then we looked at it from a year's time. But by the time we hit the 90-day mark, let me tell you, I had his attention. And as he began to see more results, he became even more committed to following this process. The other side of it is too, a lot of times we hear, well, it takes 21 days for us to develop a habit. Well, in reality, for a habit to truly become ingrained in us, it does take longer than 21 days. Now, at 21 days, it can become a little bit more comfortable. It becomes a little more ritualized, but it really is like when you get somewhere between 60 and 90 days that it becomes an embedded habit into our human condition. So by 90 days, Jeff was all in on this challenge. Not only was he committed, he was excited about it, because there's nothing like being able to look at the numbers and see the measurements and see that picture for yourself and know that you personally are helping to make that kind of a difference. I mean, it's a thrill. So what I did with him, and this is again something I do with a lot of clients, is then I worked with him to follow suit with his 7-member team. So we took them through a similar exercise. And again, there's a lot of initial groundwork that's involved. But see, that is not an expense. That's an investment of time and money, because that investment translates into a lot more profitability. And when I say profitability, 100%, it will equate into financial profitability, but it also profits the business and the people by energy profit, by time profit, by efficiency profit, by reduced waste profit. There's so many ways that it profits. But one of my favorite things is it profits the human spirit. See, a lot of my coaching clients will mention the fact that a lot of what I do is very, very practical. And I love the practical side of it, but it's equally very therapeutic. And so like I just the other day had one of my clients say to me, Anita, like you do a lot of this practical work with us and it's super cool. But I think my favorite part is like, you're almost like a business therapist. Like we're ready to have you schedule some one-on-one with each of our executive team members again and our middle managers, because like sometimes we just need therapy with you. And it kind of cracks me up, but it also warms my soul, because the reason they feel that way is not because like I'm not digging all down into, all of their secrets and their private thoughts and all that. That's not what it is. But it's the part of what I do that encourages people, lifts them up, acknowledges, it expresses appreciation, but then teaches other people how to do it as well. And so I love that side because it lifts the human spirit. And here's what I know from that practical side, though. When you engage the human spirit, when the human spirit feels energized and revived, people perform better. Productivity increases. Efficiency is enhanced. Effectiveness gets better. Accuracy improves. So there's a lot of practical benefits to it, but then people just feel better. Like they have a more pleasant work life. They, instead of like dreading and moaning and groaning about I have to go to work, people start feeling like I get to do this. I'm excited to do this. I'm looking forward to doing this. And yet they still have even more of like a home balance. So we hear this thing about work-life balance. Well, they have more of a life balance too, because when you get things more in order and at work, then you have more time to live your life. And you're not just living to work. You literally get to work to live. And so all of that comes into play when it comes to like I said, lifting up the human spirit. So it's one of my favorite things. I love to help people get lit up, and then I love to watch them get lit up. It's so much fun. But then it always, always, always helps the business. So that's what we did with Jeff's team. So Jeff was already lit up about this. So what we did is we took his 7-member team through the exercise, and they got lit up as well after they started seeing some results. And like at 30 days, it was a little exciting for them to be able to see some numbers and see the impact that it was making for them. And each one of them, depending on what their roles and responsibilities were, which is another piece that I take these groups through, but depending on what that was, some of them had different areas of emphasis. So their top 3 varied a little bit. And yet, because they were part of one department, one team, they interlocked. Some of them were almost like hand in glove. And so when they're working together with that same mission in mind, oh my gosh, the results just magnify. And that's exactly what happened. And so as each of them became very intentional to focus 80% of their work time being productive in the top 3 areas that were most profitable for this business, the results were amazing. No kidding. By the end of the first month of getting the whole team involved, we were able to measure a 20% increase in productivity. And for this particular business, it equated to an additional $300,000 in annual gross revenues. That was just in 30 days. And as time went on and they were becoming even more focused and more intentional on some of these sides of productivity, those numbers were refined a little bit. And actually, they ended up being able at the end of a year to see where gross revenues increased by over $420,000 for this business. And when you put all of the pieces together for Jeff and his 7-member team, get this, after a year, and this was trackable. It was measurable. And believe me, when I tell you there were immeasurables too, that there's no way you can truly get an accurate dollar amount or even a close estimate on this. So I really can't tell you what the complete impact was. But measurably, we were able to see that there was a $1.2 million additional revenue increase with Jeff and his team all focused in this area. Did you hear what I said in the beginning? They started out with annual gross revenues of $1.5 million. After a year of working with Jeff and his team, that moved to $2.7 million. And at this stage in this business, it was just Jeff and his team that I was working on. So it's not like there were multiple teams that were all adding to this. Now, there were a couple of other teams that obviously when we got those kind of results, the client was like, hey, we want you to work with these folks over here too. And we did. That business right now is grossing just over $5 million a year. And let's see, we're probably looking back about 3.5, 4 years ago when I first started working with them. You think that doesn't excite me as a coach? Oh my gosh. And just think about this. This is not a complicated system or process that I'm talking about. This is something that any business of any size can do at some level. But the magnitude of impact, and especially when you think about when this is duplicated year after year after year and the compounding interest of that, what this can do for companies and increasing their income, priming their profits, and strengthening their sustainability, that helps me accomplish my mission through P4 Power Coaching for American businesses. Yeah, I get lit up about that. Now, let me shift gears because there was another business and it was a different type of industry, but it wasn't the industry difference that created the change in dynamic and outcome. It literally was the difference in attitude and engagement with the client. So in this case, I'm going to call this person Sarah. So Sarah would have been in a comparable management position as Jeff. But she, from the very get-go, when I tried to talk to her about focusing on this, there was a lot of resistance and passive aggressiveness and frankly, a lot of excuses about how she didn't have time to sit down and figure this out. And she was so busy and she knew already that she was, doing the most important things that she should do. And everything just felt like almost an argument or a debate. And it really made me sad because when I'm hired, I'm not coming in to make life more difficult for anybody. As a matter of fact, my goal is to come in and make life better, easier. So even when I talk about profits and things like that, from someone in a leadership position, my goal is I want to make you look good. That's part of what I'm doing there. And I'm telling you, if you can help blacken the bottom line, you're looking pretty good as a leader at that point. But there are, and thankfully they're very rare, but occasionally I run into someone that I don't know what it is, and I'm sure it's different with different people. Sometimes it is a personality matter. Sometimes I can tell, especially if there's a little more conversation, that maybe it's been life events and maybe they've become embittered by life and skeptical and cynical and so they're just resistant to a lot of things. There are some people, frankly, that if it's not their idea, they're not interested. And so whatever it is, it does make me sad, but I can't change it. I can't force other people to do good things for themselves, for others, and for the organization that they serve. And I'm not going to try to force that. I've literally had to fire a couple of clients before, and I hate that. I don't want to do that. I'm so glad it's only been a couple, but it's been for this very type of reason. I'm there to make a difference. And if it becomes evident to me that I'm not going to be able to make a positive difference, then I don't want to take money anymore. I don't feel right about that. That's a matter of integrity for me. But with Sarah, I tried really, really hard because one, the company needed the benefit of her engagement in this. And two, it really could have helped lighten her load a little bit. I think she could have found ways to connect with more joy, more peace. And I think that would have impacted her life, not just professionally, but personally as well. But she wasn't open to that. And so what happened with this company, one, I ended up walking away. I didn't work with them very long, just because it wasn't working. But the owner of the company reached out to me about, probably 19, 20 months after, I had closed the coaching scope. And, at that point, he asked if he could meet with me. And so we did. And, then after that conversation, he wanted to have another meeting and look at some financials, because I talked to him about how you could measure impact. And when we looked at their financials and we were looking over that year's time, what we found was, instead of having the kind of increases that Jeff and his team had experienced at their company, this company, which was already struggling, had a 5% decline. So they actually were less profitable, and they were not in a position where they could really afford this. And so it was so sad. And I was very careful, as I always am, about what I said. I did not want to throw Sarah under the bus. I did not do that. As a matter of fact, I'm very protective. I'm always about salvaging people, not discarding them. I don't believe in treating people like they're disposable. Very, very rarely do I ever make a recommendation for someone to be let go. Every once in a while, it's the only recourse left, but most of the time, no. But in this case, after we reviewed those financials, this owner of this business, he said to me, I think I have an issue with Sarah. And he said, I hired you to work with her. And he said, I know, because I've talked to other business owners and I've heard the kind of results you've gotten, that something here wasn't working. And he said, but it's not just you. He said, it's things that have been reported to me by employees. It's things that I've heard from customers. It's things that I've heard from vendors, and I'm afraid I have an issue. And I just told him, I said, because he asked my opinion, and I said, well, that's not something that I like to recommend, releasing people from employment. But honestly, I can't speak into this one way or the other, because I just don't have enough data. And so it would not be appropriate for me to speak about it. Well, he did end up informing me that they did release her. It was probably about 60 days later. And so I did go back and I worked with this company, and we ended up having some really good results. But it made me sad, because here's the thing. It didn't have to be that way. And I still think about Sarah from time to time. I wonder how she's doing. I hope and pray for her that whatever those roadblocks were that were getting in her way, that she's figured out how to break them down or get around them so that it doesn't continue to happen. And I certainly hope that she doesn't fall into the trap that we human beings can sometimes, where we're not willing to take that hard look into our own souls and see that we are part of the problem, and then resolve to turn that around, turn away from that behavior, and become part of a solution. I hope that she was able to do that, because I know some folks are not. But whatever it is, I wish her nothing but the best. But here's where all of this relates to you. In the tale of these two leaders, there were two choices, and there were two vastly different outcomes, because each leader made a different choice. Jeff's story underlines the importance of strategic focus on profitability, and the willingness to be able to look at that, the willingness to make changes and to focus 80% of your time on profitable endeavors. Sarah's story, on the other hand, illustrates the potential consequences of not addressing productivity bottlenecks, and sometimes understanding that you are the bottleneck as a leader. And if you are a bottleneck, you are not an exceptional leader. So the question that we all must ask ourselves is simple. Are we more like Jeff or are we more like Sarah? Exceptional leadership requires intentional focus and consistent efforts toward profitability. And as I said earlier, yes, certainly financial profitability, but also intentional focus and consistent efforts impacts our mental profitability, our emotional profitability, our spiritual profitability, our energy profitability, our time profitability. And depending on where we focus and our willingness to commit to what we focus on, it can make the difference in whether we have a pleasant work day or one that makes us dread going to work. So the choice is up to you. Are you going to be Jeff or are you going to be Sarah? The 80% rule could certainly determine how you answer that question. Well, I hope you have somewhat enjoyed the stories. I hope that you take the stories to heart. And I hope that you can learn from Jeff and Sarah's examples, as different as they are, and apply the good parts to your own life and to really make an honest analysis about any areas that you might need to change. No one else can force you to do it. No one can make you. It's up to you. You have to look at that man or woman in the mirror and you have to say, am I going to be a Jeff or am I going to be a Sarah? So remember, the profits of the organization you serve, the profits of your people, and the profits for you, all different types of profits, start with exceptional leadership. So until next time, be intentional. Until next time, stay intentional, be exceptional. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. There's magic in meeting with an objective, and I always have an objective for you, not only in these episodes, but also from the other resources I offer on my website, anitabrooks.com. That's ANITABROOKS.com. There you'll find information on digital courses, webinars, books, workbooks, of course, my in-person P4 power coaching for businesses and organizations. And if you need a speaker for your conference or your strategic retreat, I'm your gal. But I'm also excited to let you know about a new service that we're offering. For less than half the price of a daily Starbucks latte for a month, you can join our P4 Power Coaching community. This is a monthly membership where you'll get insider tips. And you'll also be able to join our monthly Zoom meetings that are one part strategy sessions, one part mastermind, one part networking, one part coaching. I can promise you, you'll not only learn from me, but you'll learn from others in the group. We'll also have monthly webinars as part of the P4 Power Coaching community, and we'll have coaching resources and exercises. And you'll get first opportunities and special offers for many of the other things that we have to offer. And of course, you will get leadership encouragements. The P4 Power Coaching community is all about growth, success, and celebrating our wins. And remember, it's never too late for a fresh start with fresh faith. So embrace your exceptional leadership impact with fresh resolve to make the difference you were made for.